I want to thank you guys. I've had a wonderful time with you. It's gone really fast. But thanks so much for being so hospitable, for saying hi to me, eating lunch with me, tweeting and hash whatevering, like that, all that. It's actually been really, really fun for me. We can do all that Facebook stuff and keep it going from here. I'd love to just hear what's going on in your lives randomly from time to time. So find me, and I'm excited, very excited for our last day. So I want to tell you a couple stories today. That's really all I've done all week, so I'm going to just keep with that format. And the first one is a story, actually, that Jesus tells. And there's this funny thing about Jesus that I've noticed. I think at times Jesus would have driven me absolutely nuts because he never really answered questions the way people wanted them answered. Like, people would ask him, Jesus, what is God like? And Jesus would be like, 2 doves descended from heaven. And he would start off with this weird story, and I think I wonder if that's always the way Jesus answered questions. All right, Jesus, we're in Bethlehem. They got tacos and they got burgers. What do you think? 3 ferns sprouted on a hillside. You'd be like, no, dude, it's just A or B here, okay? But Jesus loved doing this, and I think the reason, there's probably a lot of reasons he did it, but I think one of the reasons he did it is because he wanted people to really engage what he was talking about. And he wanted to create stories and tell stories where the people who really wanted to know him and wanted to know what was going on would go after it, And so I want to tell you one of those stories, and some of you actually may have heard me tell one of these stories before, but just because I loved you guys so much, I put a different story in here too, so you wouldn't have heard the whole thing before. But here's the story Jesus tells. He's kind of talking about this idea of the kingdom of heaven. Okay, and the kingdom of heaven is something that is referred to a lot in the New Testament. And a lot of people talk about what the kingdom of heaven is, and I certainly am not the first or best person to define it, but the best way I define the kingdom of heaven, the best way I understand it, is it's basically a scenario where someone says, God, I submit to your way of life. The kingdom of heaven exists where someone says, Lord, your way of life is best, and I choose to accept it and live it out. That's the kingdom of heaven. And so Jesus is having this conversation about the kingdom of heaven with this group of people. And he says, let me tell you what the kingdom of heaven is like. And he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who found a treasure in a field. That's the way he starts it out. And he says, and once he found this treasure, he buried it again. And then it says, in his joy, he went and sold everything he had and went and bought the field. Okay, so picture this for a moment. Jesus sets up this scenario with a group of people. He says, here's what the kingdom of heaven is like. Here's what life my way is like. He says it's like this guy in a field. So picture the field for a moment, okay? Normal field, Wheaton Academy field, old Scottish field with stone fence and, tire swing or whatever. Okay, this is the field. And then Jesus says a guy comes along. Now, I picture this guy for some reason. I picture a guy who works at an office somewhere, okay, like from the movie Office Space. I don't know if you've ever seen Office Space, but I picture a guy like that. And he's got his suit on. He's got a sweet little lapel across the tie, pinstripes, shiny shoes. And he's walking along, and maybe he's running a little bit late for work that day. And he's like, oh man, and he checks his sundial watch. He's like, okay, it's between 6 a.m. and noon, so I'm really in trouble. Okay, and he's going along, he's like, I got to take a shortcut. And so he starts cutting across this field on the way to where he's kind of originally going. And as he's cutting across this field, he gets out to the edge, and just as he's about to leave the field completely, he notices this odd patch of dirt beneath his feet. He just kind of goes, wow, that looks different. The rest of this is kind of grass, but this looks like it's loose dirt. And so he does this peculiar thing. He stands there, and with his pretty little shimmering shoes, he kicks the dirt. He just kicks it a little bit. It starts to come up. And so now his curiosity begins to grow. He's like, there may be something in there. And so then he kind of hunches over a little bit, and he starts digging, and he keeps digging, and he keeps digging, and he keeps digging until his hands hit something solid. And he pulls it out, and because I think of all things buried in the ground, I relate them to mafia movies and stuff like that, I imagine he pulls out a briefcase. So he pulls out this briefcase and sets it down. And then he lifts up the briefcase slowly, and he's so excited. It's all of a sudden this ordinary day has become so extraordinary so soon. And so he starts lifting up the lid of this briefcase, and if the camera was over there, coming this way, we don't even see what's in the briefcase. We just see the expression on this guy's face when he sees what's inside. And it's he lights up, and not just like outside, like fake smile, like, oh, hi, how are you? Yeah, let's go to prom. Like, I mean, he like lights up. I mean, it's like something happens inside of him that completely changes his inside and his outside. And he's like, I know, I have to have this. And all of a sudden, like, the idea of going to work just disappears. Like, he doesn't even know where he works anymore. Like, he forgets all about it. He just goes, this is what it's all about. I've got to have this. And so he closes the briefcase, sets it back in the ground, like covers over the hole, and then he goes, I got to find out who owns this field, because I got to have this thing. And so he runs into town, and he's like, hey, do you know whose field that is over there? And they're like, which one? And they're like, which one is it? And he's like, you know, the one with the tire swing? And they're like, oh, yeah, that's Steve's field. He's like, Steve, which one is he? Is he the guy with the mustache? They're like, no, eye patch, peg leg. He's like, oh, Steve, yeah, Steve the pirate. He was in dodgeball. I remember that guy. And so it's like, oh, yeah, Steve the pirate. And so he goes, okay, I got to find Steve the pirate. And so he runs into town. He goes, Steve. Oh, there's the guy with the eye patch. And he goes up to me and he says, Steve, I know this is weird. I know this is going to sound totally insane, but I got to buy your field. And he goes, well, the field's not for sale. He's like, no, you don't understand. Name your price. You just tell me what you want for it, and I'll give it to you. And he goes, well, here's the price. He tells our guy in the suit how much the field costs, and the guy immediately goes, oh my gosh, I don't have that much. But he looks Steve's one eye, and he goes, no problem. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and I'm going to get the money. So this guy literally goes back home and has this like New Testament garage sale. He goes home and sells everything he has. He like brings it all out. He brings out his lamps and his togas, and he brings out his sandals and his extra sandals and his work sandals and his play sandals. He brings all the sandals out. And he puts little labels on them all, and he starts selling off everything. He sells his house, his donkey's best friend. He sells his children. He sells everything. He sells everything he has. Everything. This is crazy. He sells everything he has. He creates a scenario for himself where he has nothing to go home to anymore. Nothing at all. And then he gets the money, goes back and finds the guy who owns the field, and he says, here's the money. And the guy says, the field is yours. And what's crazy about all this, I mean, another thing that's crazy about all this, is when Jesus describes this guy, see, here's the way it would happen if it were me. If Jesus was telling a story about me, he'd say, Josh found the treasure. Josh wanted the treasure. He went and sold everything he had, and he was really kind of bummed that he had to do that. I mean, he wished he didn't have to give up everything to get the treasure. He wished he could have what he already had in the treasure. I mean, it was kind of a drag that he had to lose it all, but that's not the story Jesus tells about this guy. Jesus says, in his joy, he sold everything. Like this guy, this is like a completely amazing moment, completely all the way around for this guy. There's no sadness. There's no disappointment. He loses nothing and gains everything, and this guy gets that about the kingdom of heaven. And it's funny because, like, when I think about that in my life, like I woke up this morning, you know, and in some odd way, I think we all wake up and we're going, you know what I would love today? I would love to have that moment. Not necessarily where I lose everything, but where I have a moment where I go, this is what life is all about. I feel purpose. I feel joy. I mean, imagine in a moment going, I feel like I have everything I could ever want. That's the moment we all wake up wanting. And Jesus says, this guy found it by losing everything. And I'm like, Jesus, that sounds awesome. Point of order, though, Lord. Following you doesn't always feel like that. See, Jesus says, if you really step into life with me, relationship with me, and you live out this kingdom, it's a treasure. And I sit there and I go, really? I mean, it's good, but it doesn't really feel like a treasure a lot of times to me. And I think that's kind of the point of Jesus' story, at least at the front end. See, I think Jesus is painting a picture for those listening. He goes, see, to this guy it was a treasure. And I think he wants us to go, but what is it to me? He says, let me tell you what it was to this guy, but I think he wants us to look inside ourselves and go, but what is it to me? So let me ask you that question. Jesus says the kingdom is a treasure worth everything, but this morning, what is it to you? Life with Jesus, life his way, what is that to you? Is it a treasure? I know it's like a weird question, So let's try to like break it down a little bit as best we can. A treasure. If I had a treasure, I would probably wake up thinking about it. I mean, like the thing that was like the ultimate thing to me, I would probably wake up thinking about it. So let me ask you this. How often in your life do you wake up and just boom, eyes open, and you're like, Lord, you and me today. I can't wait. How often does that happen? How often, like if it was a treasure, I think I would probably fade away into dreams, kind of reflecting on it and thinking about it and wanting to be around it. What do you think about when you go to bed? Is it Christ? Is it God? Is it what He's doing in your life? Is the kingdom of heaven a treasure to you, or is it something else? See, I would wager that for a lot of us in here, and this is what it often is to me, the treasure, like this kingdom life, it's not this treasure. It's not this incredible thing. It's more like a burden. It's something we have to do. We wake up and we go, oh man, I want to do all this stuff, but I gotta do this. I'm going out on a date and I want to do this. I want to do this, but Jesus says I gotta do this. I want to spend my life this way. I want to have my relationships this way, but Jesus says it's got to be like this. So maybe for you in here this morning, the kingdom and life with Jesus is a burden. Or maybe for some of you, it's like a side project. You don't hate it, you're not against it, but it's just kind of like it's something you dabble in, you know? Kind of get over there and do it a little bit when you can. Show up at church every now and again. Maybe read the Bible. Maybe, love somebody if you're really feeling motivated. But, you just kind of, it's over here in your periphery all the time. Maybe for some of us, the kingdom it's just a tradition. It's just something we do. It's what our family believes. It's what feels like 90% of people in DuPage County say they believe. So it's just kind of something we do. I live in the suburbs. Oh yeah, and I'm with Jesus. What is the kingdom to you this morning? See, I think this is a question that if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus or a Christ follower or Christian, or if you found some other cool indie name for Christian or something, that whatever you consider yourself or call yourself, I think this is a question that Jesus says, I want you to ask this question every day. Every day. Lord, today, what is the kingdom to me? Today, what is the kingdom to me, Lord? This afternoon, what is the kingdom to me? And this is a question I've had to ask throughout my life. And if I'm being really honest with you, most of the time I really don't like my answer. Because most of the time I'm not like this guy in the field. There was a time a couple years ago, Kristen and I had moved down to Austin. And we had only been married a short time, and I was working in a church at the time. I worked at a church originally in Glen Ellen for 3 years. Then I worked at this church in Austin for about a year and a half. And I was in my office, and I'm trying to work hard, but as the days trickle by, I find myself getting better and better at Tetris and solitaire and doing less and less work. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, it's like my mind is totally drifting away from what I'm doing, and it's longing for something else, wanting something else. And the thing I started wanting, I kind of started to want a greater sense of purpose in my life. And I had this idea one day. I'm sitting in my office, and I go, what if I wasn't a pastor, and instead, what if I became a writer? That was my idea. This was the grand idea. And at first, when I thought, I was oh my gosh, I was that would be so awesome. I just write stuff and talk about stuff, and you could be as weird as you wanted to, and you'd have cool mugs around, and you could wear different vests and put your hands in them like this because you're an author, and your hair could just do whatever it wanted because people would be oh, he's an author, it's okay. I was that would be so awesome. And so all of a sudden this kind of dream, it started to come out of me, and right as I got excited about it, then all of a sudden it came crashing down when I was wait a minute, writer, that's not a job. That's saying I'm going to be a ninja farmer. It's going to be amazing. We will ninja the corn stalks everywhere. It's going to be incredible. It sounded so ridiculous to me. But as I thought about it more and I began talking to my friends about it, I was I think I need to do this. I think I need to do this. And so I not recommended, but I just ditched work the next day. I just didn't go. I woke up and I stayed home and I was I'm going to think about this and I'm going to really wrestle with this. And Lord, I'm going to talk to you about it and I'm going to see if this is really a move I need to make. Well, I get to the end of the day and I'm I need to chase this dream. And so my wonderful wife comes home, Kristen comes in, and Kristen is the most tender, delicate flower or whatever, in the entire universe. But she's tender, delicate flower, okay, but all females, okay, they have the awe gift, okay, but then they also have the gift of inspiring fear into the men that like them. And so my wife is this flower, but I also know that with one look, I can be oh my gosh. So she comes in, and I'm terrified to tell her. It's as soon as she goes, "What'd you do today?" I'll be like, "Nothing, stayed home, stayed in my pajamas and just thought about like doing stuff." Efficiency, people. It's like, what am I supposed to say? And so she comes in, and I'm like, "Hey, baby." Trying to like soften it. And I know I got to tell her. I know I need to tell her. I'm like, "Kristen, something's happening in me, and I need to pursue it." And so she wanders into the bathroom, and our little dog follows her. And I go in there, and she's washing her hands. This is a hand washing motion. And I go, "Kristen, I need to tell you something." It's like, "I think I need to quit my job." And she looks at me and she goes, "Yeah, I think you're right." I was just like, holy cow. I was like, I need to ask for everything I've ever wanted from her right now. I was like, let's go buy a spaceship. This is great. So I'm just like, holy cow. And Kristen's like, yes, you need to do that. And so she tells me that. A couple weeks later, I quit my job. I'm like, I'm going to try to be a writer. I'm going to follow the dream. I believe God's created us to be people who pursue dreams. I believe God's placed our dreams in us. And I believe that by following them, we're led closer to Him. And I was like, I need to do this. And I had this vision of how it was going to go. I don't know if you've ever done that before. You had a vision of how your year was going to go, or your season was going to go, or a night with your family was going to go, or a date was going to go. And like 1 out of a billion times does it ever happen like that. And I had this vision of how, like, after I quit my job, this was going to go. And it was like so ridiculous. It was like that all of a sudden, like, publishers were just going to be like up against my window, like just their cheek pressed up there going, write for us, write for us. And I imagined myself like touring the world, and like people are feeding me grapes and they're like fanning me with palm branches. I was like, this is going to be so awesome. And I quit my job, and I get a few months into this thing, and nothing is happening. Nothing at all. It's like, contact this person, rejection. Contact this person, rejection. Contact this person, rejection. Contact this person, ignored. It just like kept happening. Rejection, 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 ignore, ignore, ignore. And like every now and again, I'd get a little bit of momentum, and it felt like immediately after that, it just like collapsed. It just like fell apart. It's like it felt like my victories were like pushed up so close to my losses, And I just couldn't like string anything together. It actually got to a point, like a year and a half into it, we didn't have any health insurance, which by the way is a terrible idea. We didn't have any health insurance. We thought we might lose our house. And because I wasn't making any money, I had to get a part-time job. And so I'm praying, I'm like, Lord, man, if I could do something like riding motorcycles for a part-time job, I'm like, that would be so awesome. And instead, the Lord provided something else. In His goodness, the Lord said, Josh, you're not going to ride motorcycles. You're not going to be a trapeze artist. You are not going to woo women with your trombone playing. Instead, you know what you're going to do, Josh? You are going to teach sex education in Austin public high schools. And like, yeah, right? So like, half the time I'm trying to like live the dream, and the other time it's like, you hate me, God. So 3 or 4 days a week, I go into these public high schools in Austin, and I am like, hello, children. Slide number 1, and everyone's like, yeah! I mean, it really started to mess with me. Like, Kristen would come home from work, she'd be like, hey, baby, and I'm like, I don't think so. No. I know what happens. I got the pictures to prove it. Oh, man. So I'm going to this job 3 or 4 times a week, and it's such a struggle. It's so tough to get up because what I had pictured is not happening. And this is like a little side note. I think I've done a couple of these this week, a little parenthetical statement, specifically about dreamers. You guys, dreamers are not people who have their head in the clouds. Dreamers are people who are willing to crawl through the mud. They are people who are willing to struggle and sacrifice and pursue what God has put inside them. They aren't people who are fanciful and ridiculous. They are people who are brave and willing and patient. And I was none of those things at the time. And I wanted all this stuff to happen so fast, and it wasn't happening. And I wanted to give up, and so many times I got this close. And then one afternoon, I got this opportunity. I got this opportunity to go speak at a university, and it was a pretty significant deal. And so I was really grateful for it, but I was really nervous. And I got on a plane, went and landed in this town. And, I got picked up, and the whole way there, I'm like, I got to do this well. I got to do this well. Like, this is my shot. Like, this is like my opportunity. Like, if this doesn't go well, like, the whole thing's going to collapse. It's never going to happen. And so I get up on the stage. The auditorium is filled, and I start. And in, like, the first 2 minutes, I'm like, this is going awful. Like, if you're ever up in front of people, in, like, 60 seconds if they hate you. And in, like, the first, 2 minutes, I was like, this is not going well at all. And so, that's when, my imagination kicks in. I start saying all these, weird kinds of prayers. I'm like, Lord, send an asteroid. Jehovah. I'm just, praying that God would just smite me, almighty smiter, right in that moment right there. I just want it to end so bad, and it's going poorly, and the whole time I can feel it going poorly, and it ends poorly. And so the whole talk ends, I walk off the stage, and some people kind of want to chat, and I don't want to talk to them at all because I feel so embarrassed, and I feel so humiliated, and I feel so ashamed, and I feel like this thing that I've set out to do is a giant mistake. And so I'm at this university, and they have me staying in a house on campus, and so I walk across campus, and it's late in the afternoon at this point. I walk into my room, I close the door, I lay down on the bed, and I just start crying. So I'm like, God, this is not what I want at all. My dream is dying right in front of me. Might already be dead. And I'm there, and it's I feel this weird sense of anguish. And the thing is I feel this for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. I'm just laying there all by myself. And then all of a sudden this question occurred to me. I don't know if God floated it down to me or if it just came out of my own mind or whatever. But I had to ask myself this question. Why is this bothering me so much? Why does it feel like my dream is life and death for me when I claim that Christ is life and death for me? And I sat there for a few moments, I thought about it, and then I realized something. I realized that the kingdom, life with Jesus, was no longer most valuable to me. It was no longer the treasure, and instead, my dream was. This thing, this pursuit, this vision of my life, my gifts, my talents, what I wanted to happen had replaced Jesus and life with him as the most valuable thing in my life. And this is usually, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's usually the way it happens. If you're sitting here and you go, you know what, if I'm being honest and not just giving the right answer, the kingdom and Jesus, that's not the treasure to me. Usually that's because something else has replaced it. Something else has kind of knocked God out of where he belongs. And so if you're sitting in here and you ask yourself that question, you go, is the kingdom a treasure to me? And if you're being honest with yourself today, you say, today it's not. You owe it to yourself to ask the next question. The question is, if it's not, then what is? I mean, what is it right now today that you hold most dear in your life? That you just, with white knuckles, you hang on to it and you go, this is what I need. This is what it's all about. Everything else could fail, but I need this. What is the treasure of your life? I mean, there's all sorts of things, right? I mean, for some of us, it's something simple. Something so simple, it's something like being liked. We just want people to like us. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be liked. But you guys, at some point, these things start to ruin our lives. They start to take over. Sometimes these desires, when our desires grow too big, they put us in cages that we can't get out of. It's like we can't move. Maybe your treasure is being liked. Maybe for some of you, your treasure is reputation. And that doesn't mean that it's not even necessarily oh, your reputation, everyone needs to think you're awesome. Maybe it's just you are obsessed with the idea of everyone in here and around you going, that person's an awesome Christian. And that's what really matters, is not your relationship with Christ, but what people think about your relationship with Christ. It's so easy to fall into that. For some of us, I'll bet it's just being accepted. And that's another healthy desire when it's carried out in healthy proportions. We just want to be accepted. For some of us, I'll bet it's success. Academic success, athletic success. Does God put us on this planet to pursue things with our whole hearts? Absolutely, He does. But again, when those things grow too big, they end up crushing us. Are you obsessed with success? Is your master success? Maybe it's fame and like for you, that you just have to find a way to get that. Maybe for some of you, it's like a dating relationship or marriage or a picture of family, and you just gotta have it, and without that, your life is just never gonna work. Maybe it's just being in control, and you have to like move all the chess pieces of your life and get it exactly the way you want, or you just cannot find joy. What is the treasure of your life now? See, it's fascinating what Jesus does here, I think. Because all those things I just mentioned, and we could fill in like a ton of other blanks, I know. But all those things, and this just seems like it's a reality of life, all those things I just mentioned, you may get those, and you may not. I mean, you guys, we can play the right hand, we can meet all the right people, right place, right time. You can work hard, and you may not achieve the level of success you're looking for. You can be the most tender-hearted and wonderful and caring and charismatic person in the world. It does not mean you're always going to be accepted. It doesn't mean that. You can love Jesus so much in your wonderfully broken way. It does not mean other people are going to see you and go, wow, that person loves Jesus. It doesn't mean that. You could long to have a wonderful family that's crafted just the way you want it. It does not mean you're going to get it. And what's interesting about what Jesus says is, he says, but the treasure I'm talking about. See, the treasure I'm talking about, it's not like locked away up in a fortress on a hill. It's not like put behind steel doors where only really strong or privileged people can get to. It's not something that's like in a library where only the intelligent can access. It's not hidden in a church so only the holiest people can get there. He says, you want to know where the ultimate treasure of life is found? It's found in the most basic substance of earth. It's found in the dirt. It's found right in front of you. It's right in front of you. You don't have to run across the world to find it. It's right here all the time. It's like we talked about on Monday. This incredible being in the presence all the time of such broken situations. Jesus says, the treasure that will bring you more joy than you can ever fathom is found right in front of you. It's available to all. And I love this story because guy in suit is out there and like Jesus paints this picture so incredibly because like this guy's out in the field and he kicks the dirt. And maybe people are walking by him. They're going to do their thing. And he starts, like I said, kind of digging the dirt out like this. And then he like gets more excited, gets like more drawn to this idea. And then he starts doing like the little kid like sandbox dog paddle thing. Like he starts going like this. And as he's doing this guy that was so put together and looked so wonderful and just ready to take on the world, he starts sweating and his hair comes out of place. And now he's got dirt under his fingernails. And he's digging down further, and now he's like wiping stuff off, and now his suit, he takes his jacket off, he's got mud all over his shirt, he's digging and goes, I've got to have this thing. And the only time he finds it is not when he's standing up, it's when he does what? It's when he falls to his knees, and he's willing to dig into the things God has put right in front of him. He's down on his knees, and he says, it's in here, and he pulls it up, and he has it, and he hugs this thing, and he looks so different than he did, but he doesn't look like how we often think someone who finds Christ should look. Because he doesn't look put together. You know what he looks? Totally unraveled. Completely unglued. Again, the picture of beauty Jesus paints for us is not this picture of everything's great. He says, no. By earthly standards, it's much worse. But now, he has encountered the reality that divine beauty in the midst of wild human imperfection is the most glorious picture this world has to offer. And he has it. Jesus says it's right in front of you. You guys, the opportunity to engage the kingdom of Jesus is right in front of us every day. The opportunity to love the people, to love people, it's in front of us all the time, every single day. It's available here. It's available when you walk out of here. It's available when you're in your car. It's available when you go home. Jesus says the way of life that I'm talking about, the opportunity to give grace is always right in front of you. It's always there. The opportunity to cry out to God in your fears and in your pain and in your brokenness and in your doubts. Guess how often it's available? Always, all the time, because God's always there. And he says the opportunity for you to take a step toward the passions that God has placed within you. You know when that opportunity is there? Always. You can always take a step. The opportunity to dialogue with God is always there. Jesus says the kingdom I am talking about, the treasure I am talking about is right in front of you all the time. And that night in Kansas for me, that's where I was at this speaking thing. I guess as I realized more and more, Lord, you're not it for me right now. You're just not. I guess that led to my metaphorical digging in the dirt moment. Digging in the dirt of me, going, what's really going on in here, Lord? And digging into God and going, Lord, what do you really want to do in my life? Not what do I really want to do with my life, but Lord, what do you really want to do with my life? And I prayed, and I didn't really know how to change my own heart. I don't know if anyone's ever really figured out how to do that. If you have, please let me know. But I sat there going, Lord, you're not the treasure of my life, but I really want you to be. Can you help me? And I prayed for a while. And finally, I fell asleep. And at like 2 or 3 in the morning, there's a knock on my door. And I sleep very heavy, like a building has tipped over. Like nothing wakes me up. And when I wake up from like sleeping, it takes me like 45 minutes to like come into coherence, you know? So like I get up and I do like what, I don't know if you do this when you wake up, but I like just start wiping my face. Like as if that helps. You're just like, like, not like it helps, you're like playing with your ear as if that's like some kind of like sensory dream thing. And like, so I'm walking through my room and it's all dark in there. And so I'm like, it's like half real life, half like dream world, like overlapping. So like, I walk past the corner and like Steve Urkel's sitting there with like a can of corn. He's like, ha! It's like the whole cast of like Dawson's Creek and Saved by the Bell and Boy Meets World are all like, and I'm like walking through, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I stumble over to the door, and you know, when you're half awake, you forget every normal thing. So I'm like, okay, I gotta open the door. Where's the knob? You like think it's like a big crank, like you're on a pirate ship or something. So and I'm like, oh right, it's where it always is. And I open the door, and I see these 2 silhouettes, but the dream world is still there. So it looks like I'm like looking at the porthole of a submarine. So there's like fish going by. It's like Little Mermaid, Nemo. Like this whole thing is happening. And okay, so one more face wipe, and then I see this part is not a dream. There's actually 2 silhouettes in front of me. There's 2 people standing there, and it's the dean of students and the campus pastor. And that's what I'm like. Did I kill someone when I was sleeping or something? What have I done? And they're there, and they go, Josh, we're really sorry to bother you, but we have a situation here on campus, and we were wondering if you could help. And I'm like, okay, well, what's going on? And they go, we have a young lady here. She's 19 years old, and she just got a phone call that her mom died very suddenly. And they're like, and we know you don't know her at all, but I know you've been through that, and would you be willing to go talk to her? And immediately it's like, kingdom is in front of you all the time. There all the time. And I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And they, as I go to get my sweatshirt, they stop me and they go, oh, and Josh, one more thing. Also, this young lady is also pregnant. I'm like, okay. So I throw on my sweatshirt and they walk me over to like her dorm, and I go in there and I sit down on one of those like stained couches with like weird big mustard stains. You know how I got there? I sit down. A couple minutes later, this girl walks out. She's got sweats on. She's white as a ghost. And as she's walking in to sit down, I'm thinking to myself, Lord, what can I possibly say? Like there's and like that's a great question, because it takes me to realize there's nothing I can say. And yet, Lord, the kingdom is in front of me all the time, and all I can do in this moment is go, Lord, help. It's the only thing I can really do is go, Lord, help. So this girl sits down, she introduces herself, I introduce myself to her, and it's like awkward silence for a few seconds, and I go, so, what's kind of the dominant thought in your mind right now? And she looks at me and she goes, how in the world am I supposed to believe God exists? And if he exists, how in the world am I supposed to believe that he's good? And I just sat there and I was like, this is the kingdom. People's lives falling apart and a God sitting in the center of a moment somehow right there. And she said that and I was just like, yeah. It's like I wonder that too sometimes. And we talked for a little while and, then for a while we just sat there quiet. And at one point I asked her, I was like, so tell me about your mom. She started telling me the stories about how her mom, would take her to the park and how her mom taught her how to play poker and how her mom was like a terrible bluffer and she'd lose on purpose just so they could go get ice cream. And, just awesome stories about this woman that she had just lost. At one point she got sick. She ran to the bathroom like kind of vomiting and she came back. We sat there talking till about 5 a.m. and the campus pastor and the dean showed back up and they said, hey, it's time to go. We got to take her to the airport to fly back and be with her dad and her brother. And she waved goodbye and left. And I'm sitting there by myself and I have to walk back to my little campus house. And it's pouring outside. I go out, I'm just getting soaking wet. Walk across this courtyard, go back up to my room, shut the door, lock it. And I laid down and the night ended right where it began, except this time I was going, God, I get it. You're in front of me all the time. And you're orchestrating beautiful things all the time. And Lord, when I choose to participate in the things you're orchestrating and you're doing, God, the amount of joy and beauty is so much greater than anything I'm going to do on my own. He makes that available to me all the time and to you all the time. You guys, we all have a heroic dimension. We all have a monstrous dimension. Life is uneven. We are uneven. But God meets us in it all the time, and he says, I am here whenever you want, and you can participate in what I am doing whenever you want. That's the kingdom. As I pray, I'm going to invite the band back up. And, as they start playing, I don't know where you're at in this today. And that's really the most important question. It's not where are you at in this yesterday or where are you going to be at it tomorrow. It's where are you at in this today. God is most passionate about your today, not your tomorrow. And so as we start to sing, think about what you got to think about. Pray about what you got to pray about. God, thank you so much for meeting us, Lord. Thank you so much, Lord, that you make yourself available to every single one of us, Lord. You don't make yourself accessible to some of us, but to all of us. God, the beautiful things you do in our life look so different than what we think they're going to be. Lord, I pray that today we would dig into you, God. Dig into ourselves. God, invite you to meet us in that place, Lord. And God, I pray that for all of us, you might be the treasure of our lives and hearts. In your name, amen.